Bandwidth for First Updates Now is supported by AndyMark. Are you competition ready? Go to andymark.com and keep your team inspired. And by the Blue Alliance. Keep up to date on all live and archived First Robotics events and team stats at thebluealliance.com. First Updates Now is brought to you by viewers like you. Fund relies on the generous support of our fans in order to continue to keep creating content. Please consider donating, giving bits, or subscribing. Subscribe for a few bucks a month or for free through Twitch Prime. And don't forget that our subscribers get 5x chance to win on all giveaways.
Shut up and sit down.
Tonight on Candidly Speaking, expect strong opinions on Mid-Atlantic District integration and the potential death of WoW, and the impact of mid-season rule changes. We'll also respond to audience comments and questions in chat where you can ask us anything and expect a no BS response. Candidly Speaking for First Updates Now, I'm Libby Kamen-Drost.
And I'm Karthik Kanagas of Apathy, and our producer for tonight is Nick Olson. If you have any questions that you'd like to be read during our Q&A segment near the end of the show, please tag First Updates Now in chat and just type it in.
To start us off, we're going to talk about a possible redrawing of the borders of the 1st Mid-Atlantic District. This week, FRC Director Frank Merrick sent emails out, which were subsequently posted to Chief, to Western Pennsylvania teams, letting them know that 1st Mid-Atlantic was considering a realignment of their borders that would bring all of Pennsylvania into the 1st Mid-Atlantic region. That means Central Pennsylvania and Western Pennsylvania, which is not currently part of MAR. This would open up the possibility of Pennsylvania state funding for 1st Mid-Atlantic, as well as bringing those PA teams into the district. This also means that the Pittsburgh Regional would no longer be available for teams in Ohio and West Virginia, which leaves those teams with even fewer options as they keep getting surrounded and closed in on by district. Karthik, there's a lot to unpack here, so I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, there's a lot. So first of all, I guess I'm really new to all this. I don't really, I didn't even know that MAR didn't include all of Pennsylvania, or maybe I did know that at one point, but it's nothing I really remembered. And, you know, I'm not from this region, but I do think it's really weird on Chief how every time there's one of these threads about districts in a region, or like regionals in a region, and a region might maybe go to districts, is how so many people from other regions care and get engaged in discussions and arguments that have no bearing on them. So I really don't want to be one of those people, but so I'm just going to try and look at this from, hey, I'm a dude who doesn't know anything about this other than, you know, 11-14 went to the Pittsburgh Regional in 2011, and then we got booed by a bunch of people from Pittsburgh. That's my impression. So that's all I really know. But
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you know, it happened. It was not a fun time. But if you look at a map, because I am good at looking at maps, I have a lot of experience at that. This is confusing to me, because when you look at this map, if you look at it, you don't really see why the Western Pennsylvania teams would be a part of 1st Mid-Atlantic, because they're so far away from the center of teams there, but they're much closer to the center of mass of the teams from Ohio and West Virginia. So logically, you know, if you just look at a map without any borders, but borders are a real thing. And, you know, if there is state funding available in Pennsylvania for 1st that is contingent on it 1st Mid-Atlantic supporting all of the state, then it's hard to argue against. If it's going to lower costs for all 1st Mid-Atlantic teams, if it's going to be that huge source of funding similar to what Michigan has, that's massive and can't be ignored. However, I don't think anyone who's talking on Chief really knows the answers about that funding, so I think we should back away from that for right now. I know there's been a lot of talk about a possible district between Ohio, West Virginia, and Western Pennsylvania. And geographically, that seems to make sense. And it seems like those teams play together in a lot of regionals right now, and they go to off-seasons together. And it seems like those teams are networked well. So if those districts are actually close to happening, which I have no idea, it might make sense to let those happen. I think what we really need to focus on is what these teams from Western Pennsylvania and the Pittsburgh and Erie region want, because this is going to affect them the most. It obviously affects 1st Mid-Atlantic and the other FMA teams. It obviously affects the Ohio teams, but this is really about those Western Pennsylvania teams. And I think it's also important to remember is that we shouldn't assume that they're all going to think and vote like a block. because there's probably different opinions from different teams in the region, and you have to be aware of that. I know when we went to districts in Ontario, it was really important to recognize that even within a certain city, which might have 10, 15 teams, there's a variety of opinions because all those teams have different backgrounds. Bigger picture, because if Western Pennsylvania does join up with FMA, it does kind of leave Ohio and West Virginia landlocked in between districts, and we've already seen this in other areas. South Carolina is kind of landlocked. The state of New York is quickly becoming landlocked, and that doesn't give these teams a lot of options. And so here's what I'm thinking right now. And I know Libby's going to want to talk more about a universal district system. I think there's a lot to be said about that, and that's important. So I'm going to stay off the universal district system. But not all regions are going to be able to go to districts. There's going to be some areas that's just going to take a long time. They're going to be stuck in regionals. Right now, as it stands, a team from District A is allowed to compete in District B if there's room at the events, and they only pay $1,000 registration fee. What's stopping us from letting a regional team play at a district as long as the district has accommodated all the teams in their area? So, all the district teams have signed up for 2. All the teams within the district who wanted third play have gotten their shot. Everyone locally has gotten their shot. If they can, in this situation, if they can already let outsiders from a different district come in, why not let some of these regional teams in? I mean, a couple years ago, there was a district event with only 24 teams. Last year in Ontario, we had one with 27. Like, if there are these events that are struggling to fill up to their capacity, let the regional teams play. I mean, someone work out the cost. I still don't know why regional teams have to pay $4,000 for their second regional, but that's a different story. But someone work out the cost stuff. But it would really be helpful for these regional teams who are kind of stuck without options of where to play and are struggling to get into events. So that's something that we can work out really easily, especially since we're allowing teams from other districts to come in. We should probably find a way to allow teams from other regionals to come in.
Yeah, I think that's such a great solution, and it seems like, I don't work for First, but it seems easy enough. And if this were a district if this group, this geographic area were to become part of the Mid-Atlantic region, then if everybody gets their plays and everybody has their third plays, why can't one of those Ohio teams come and play at a Western Pennsylvania MAR district? That doesn't really make sense to me at all. I am a huge fan, and I think this is a perfect case study for why you would want to adopt what some people call the universal district system, which is that once you get to a certain geographic area that has tons and tons and tons of districts, much like the Northeast, as a district team, I could choose to play an event in the Mid-Atlantic. I could choose to play an event in New England. And whatever those 2 first plays are, accrue points towards my district championship. And of course, there's issues there. It's not a perfect solution because the point system does kind of compare you to teams at the other events, right? When they talk about ranking and selection order and all that stuff. So I totally get that it's not perfect, but for an area that is so saturated with districts, but now we're approaching a problem where there are teams who would be in the district who are not in the right geographic area. Like, it would be so great, let's say, if WoW became a district, which, by the way, there were some questions in chat. It's supposed to be Western Virginia, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania. That's what WoW comes from. It's not a great acronym, but it is an acronym.
Shouldn't that be a WVALP?
But if that were its own district, then those Western Pennsylvania teams could choose to pick either. Because one of the things brought up on Chief is like, what if those teams want to take a road trip? And that's totally valid. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be teams in that central and Western Pennsylvania region that say, yeah, we love to play in MAR. We'd love to come out to Philly. We'd love to go to New Jersey event. Like, it's still, a 5-ish hour drive. So if you're not familiar with the geography on this side of the country, we're all in high school or more, right? But also from where our district championship currently is to Pittsburgh, where that regional would be, is about a 5.5 hour drive. So if that is what helps you put it in perspective, that's how far away these are. So we'd love to go to New Jersey. Nobody. Accurate as a New Jersey team. But I really think that this is one of those cases where it would be so lovely to just open the district borders. And I think there's, whether it's the case that Karthik's talking about, allowing a regional team to come in as long as all the district teams have their plays, or allowing teams to cross district and just have that be their point accruing event. Either one of those could work out really well and eliminate the complaints that we're seeing, right? Because as a Mid-Atlantic team, I hope, like you said, that and it totally makes sense this would be a funding thing, right? I hope that including all of Pennsylvania allows First Mid-Atlantic to receive better grant funding to be able to serve all the teams. I hope that would actually serve all of the teams, and I that's the joy of the district, is that if they're getting this funding, but it is also possible that they receive funding that is meant for Pennsylvania teams and it doesn't help the New Jersey or Delaware teams. And that is what it is, but it helps all of us because they're getting more for something, right? And I think that's fantastic. But I would be a little bit, it would still be hard. A lot of people have brought up on Chief as a district team. I feel like I wouldn't see a Western Pennsylvania team until district championship, and it really wouldn't quite feel like a unified district. So that's my other bit of thoughts on that, I guess.
Yeah, I know in Ontario, if anyone's actually looked at a map, Ontario is massive. Ontario is 1.5 times the size of Texas, and everything's bigger in Texas. So, we go through the challenges, but of having teams from far off areas, but there's a surprising amount of mixing from teams from like the Windsor area and the Toronto area and the Eastern Ontario area. So just because of the way the events are set up. So, and I think some teams do like that, 3-4 hour drive. Obviously, they don't want to be doing it constantly, but I think you kind of see that. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like some sort of universal point system would be great, because right now, the amount of mixing between districts isn't high. It's only for third plays. But if we could give teams a way that, who just want to do 2 events, who don't want to do a third event, to do one of their events outside and accrue points, that would be great. I know a lot of people are concerned because it takes points out of the district, or some teams from a stronger district may try and go to a weaker one. But that sort of gaming the system already exists within the district system, and is always going to exist. Like, I get why it's a concern, because 5 points can make the difference between a team qualifying and not qualifying. On the flip side, I think if we're very, very worried about that sort of thing, there's probably bigger fish to fry, and you might want to even do an automatic assignment system. So I think that's all we really have to say about this topic, because, well, first of all, we got a short show tonight because we got First After Dark coming up at 9 p.m. But also, I think this is one that's really important for the teams who are really affected by it to sort it out. So I really encourage those teams to reach out to Frank. He's really, really good about listening to feedback, and that's why he sent those emails out. Reach out to Frank, or maybe even try and have a reasonable discussion on Chief Delphi, maybe.
Reasonable? So, Chief Delphi? Dream big, buddy. Dream big.
I'm not even going to start. There was a thread yesterday where someone removed a normal dictionary word that every high schooler should be using, but because they found that word too offensive. So. Oh,
I thought you were going to rant about the poll about all of your sins.
That was weird.
Just when I thought Chief couldn't get any worse, it got so much worse.
Okay, so mid-season rule changes. This is a big one. Rule changes, they're everywhere. No one generally likes mid-season rule changes, aside from those teams who benefit from them and can't see the bigger picture. But sometimes rule changes are necessary. This year there were 2 major ones. Team Update 11 changed Rule RO3 to allow for minor protrusions from the frame perimeter to be exempt from the robot volume restrictions, bringing the rule more into line with what teams have become used to over the past few years. This was controversial in the eyes of many people who I think can't really see the forest from the trees, to say the least. Then there was Team Update 13, which relaxed GO9B to allow robots that are breaking the plane of the switch to launch cubes, instead of only allowing those robots whose bumpers were contacting the switch to launch cubes. This also drew a passionate response, a quieter response than Team Update 11 did, but that might have just been because of the timing. So, Libby, what did you think of these changes? Do you think they were appropriate, and did they impact your team?
So the first one, the frame perimeter did not impact us. We're one of the teams that is like, oh, okay, there's a sizing thing. We're not very lucky, so we're probably going to do something dumb and accidentally end up too big. So let's go a little bit smaller. That's you know my team. That sounds pretty accurate for us, right? But I think the controversy over it was a little bit overblown. I agree that it really, really sucked if you were a team who noticed it week 5 and then had it changed week 6. I totally get that, but I tend to fall pretty squarely into the camp of like, if this is going to save a large amount of headaches and it's not going to be a giant pain, there was a lot of arguing back and forth about whether that, half inch gives people a competitive advantage over all of these different things. And I feel like that was just so extra and so unnecessary. My heart always breaks when you see teams at an event who find out they're a quarter inch too big and have to, redo everything. And there's this you can read the whole chief thread about arguing whether that's helpful or inspirational or part of the challenge. I do think this is where one of those issues where I see both sides of it, right? I totally also see the weight doesn't work that way. We don't make rule changes to say, oh, we're noticing so many teams are overweight, so we're going to say it's 130 pounds now. I'm not, I could take or leave 11. Update 13 bothers me a lot because teams spent 6 weeks deciding how they were going to design the robot, right? And that might include switch scoring in such a way that you need to be up against the fence. And now it's like, oh, you don't actually have to do that. So teams could have designed totally different ways for their mechanisms to work with the field. On top of that, I really very much do not jive with the fact that referees are now going to have to be watching for all of the zip ties with smiley faces on them, instead of just seeing, is the bumper touching the thing, right? I'm not, the refs already have enough to do on the field, especially in a field sensor heavy game where they might have to start paying attention to the field state because the sensors stop working.
No, not even thinking about that.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. I know. It's fine. I like how today has gone from candidly speaking to just like sad whining.
I need 148. It's fine, puppy. Like
I have one. I have an it's fine dog. The next time our lovely producer changes scenes, I may go grab it because it's in my office. Anyway, 13 bugs me because there is no reason at all to change fundamentally that section of gameplay after teams have designed their robots and back to them. It just the point was brought up by many teams. Like, we designed specifically to fit up against the fence. If we'd known this, it would have totally changed what we decided. I know for us, it probably would have changed some of the pieces of how we thought about scoring on a switch. It's you want to think about being consistent, getting up onto the fence, and now all of a sudden you don't have to do that anymore. You can just kind of get nearby-ish and then chuck it over. So I'm not a fan of update 13, even including update 14, where it's like, make sure you're being really obvious. Like, why are we putting more work on the refs, and why are we changing a fundamental part of gameplay for teams after they're done with their robots? I don't think that's appropriate. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't need to speak. Libby covered everything that I was going to say, which is awesome that we're on the same page on this one. No, don't be. Thank you. So I believe that rules changes should only be used in the rarest of circumstances. Like, once the manual comes out, it should be fairly locked down. I've always seen the rules as a contract between teams and the game design committee. And full disclosure, I used to write the game rules for Vex for the last 10 years. That was my job. So I see both. I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been a team participant and I've been a rule writer. And I do believe that both sides need to hold up to their ends of the bargain to stick with this. However, I do also believe there are certain times where rules updates should happen. And so there's some specific cases. Number one, if it is discovered that there's a safety issue in the game. For example, the Frisbees in 2013, when human players were allowed to throw Frisbees all match long, and there were just Frisbees flying everywhere, and it was kind of crazy. They saw that in week 0 and they made a change. Did that affect teams' designs? Absolutely. I think there's a lot of teams who designed ground intakes in 2013 who would not have if they had known that they would have only had access to the bulk of the frisbees in the last 30 seconds of the match. So that was unfortunate for them, but that was a good call because safety was an issue. I think it's okay to make a rules change to fix a major mistake in the game. Now, how you decide what's major or what's not isn't the real issue. You would need to be looking at more of how is this going to impact teams' designs? Will this change? Because if it's going to impact a lot of teams' designs, then it's probably something you need to avoid doing unless the impact of the game is major. But, for example, in 2015, killing the noodle agreement. I don't think anyone's robot design was based around the noodle agreement, but the noodle agreement was stupid. Yeah, but the noodle agreement was stupid, so that was an easy one. This is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Let's just get rid of it. It's not going to affect any designs. Like huge impact to the game and making it not suck and doesn't impact designs. In 2003, this is going way back there, so I don't even want to go into the details of it, but the scoring for stacking wasn't determined by the number of totes in the stack. It was determined by what was known as a stack height unit. And it was very weird. And if you had the stack rotated, you could stack 2 totes but get credit for 3. Like, that didn't make any sense. And eventually they realized, hey, this doesn't make sense, and they changed it. Did it affect some designs? Maybe, but they got to it early enough. I think there's been cases where First has made changes too late that have affected designs and unduly impacted certain teams. I think ruling 118's bridge grabber to be illegal in 2012 and 3928's under the bridge robot in 2012. I think those rulings came way too late, but I can see why they made them since it was only affecting a couple of teams, but a couple of teams is a lot. So using that framework or a basis of when a rule change should happen, let's look at the current ones. I think the sizing change was a good change. I think it was fixing a major mistake in the game. The rule was not clear, and I can talk more about that in a second. And even worse, it made the first provided kit bot, so something you got in the kit of parts, it put it in a place where it could very easily become illegal. And so there was a chance we would be seeing possibly dozens of teams at every event, or at least every first event of the season, dozens, showing up with oversized robots without an easy fix. I mean, that would have been a miserable experience. Because it's not like some of them, you might have been able to grind the bolt heads, but other ones, it was just like, what do you do? And like, that's not inspirational for anyone. I think First needs to really pay attention to what's happened the last 2 years for their rule. So last year, the rule about sizing, it was new, and there was huge concerns that people weren't going to be aware of it. So much to the point that Andy Mark had a contest to try for which team could do the best job of making teams aware of the rule change. If we need suppliers to have contests to make people aware of rules changes, like why can't we just have like a big red box in the manual that says, flash, flash, pay attention to this rule? I know a lot of people don't like that idea because they think people will only pay attention to the ones in the red boxes or something like that. But I just think if there's been a change like this year was, really call it out in the manual.
One of the things I want to touch on that really quickly, because one of the things that I read on Chief, I don't even remember who posted it, was like, we need to put this out in a way that teams pay attention to it. And I know that, Chief and First Updates Now and all that, those audiences are obviously people who are super, super into this and seek out more information about the community. But the thing First puts out that informs people of rule changes is the team updates. Like, they were arguing for a new document to go out that explained the important rule changes. And I don't even remember who it was, but to that person or anyone who agreed with that, if you're listening, that's called the team update. Please read it. Like, it's not optional. Team updates are so not optional.
I get that, Libby, but at the same time, like, we ask a lot of these teams. And so remember,
That's true.
Like, there's a 6-week build season, and the new way they're starting teams, I don't necessarily like it, is like, hey, as long as you have one adult in a classroom, you can have a first team. And so it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of emails and a lot of updates, and I see why things get missed. And I totally get how teams would have missed this rule. And for everyone who's saying it's like, oh, well, teams just can't read the rules, I'll tell you this. There are some teams in first that most of the people who are complaining look up to and consider some of the best teams in first. One team who some people consider to be the best team in first who totally missed this rule too. They would have been fine because they can adapt really quickly, but it was not just rookies who missed this. So I'm totally okay with this fix. I don't think the half inch makes a big deal. People who are like, oh, well, I could have designed my intake to be half inch. That's great. That's
cool.
Really great. I don't want to see 12 teams show up and see their faces when it's like, hey, you've got to take apart your drivetrain, pull out at half to an inch, and then put it back together, and you lose your whole practice day. And sure, we could have tried to get the message out there via Chief and via emails and whatever, but there still would have been teams that showed up. I mean, in 2012, we had a team that showed up with a 38-inch by 38-inch robot because they didn't read the kitbot rules, and they just built the full frame to the full size.
Oh, no.
It's a funny story because they also pieced out at 3 p.m. and just looked at 1114. It's like, you guys got this, right? And then left, and then we had to rebuild their robot. Yeah, it was literally, you guys got this. And, JT had to take the hacksaw to it. But, I get that it goes against my whole principle of I don't like mid-season rule changes, but I think it was a good one. As for the launching change, I don't agree with it because on one hand, it definitely impacts teams' design. There are teams who would have designed their robots differently. I mean, there's two big classes of robots this year, and one is like, elevators that are placing, and the other is the shooters. And I think a lot of teams would have done more shooting if this rule had been written the way it was at the beginning of the season. So looking at the fact that I think we can all agree that it definitely has some sort of design impact, what benefit are we getting out of it? I don't see the benefit. And maybe I'm missing something because I wasn't at a week 0 event. But I think it's easier to tell if a robot is contacting the switch than it is to see if one's breaking the plane. Breaking the plane is so hard to tell, especially if you're not lined up exactly on the plane. But since it's a box, no one's going to be lined up on the plane that's parallel to the long field walls because you'd have to be behind the driver station to be lined up against that. And so, contact's is just so much easier to see. And I'm not sure how this is going to lower. There's a team update 15 out right now. If our producer can let us know what's in that.
Oh, yay! Maybe they deleted the entire game and we got a new one to play.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be minor. I can't see them doing a major change on competition week of week 1, but hey, who knows? I just think this is hard for referees to see. I think it's in fact harder, and I think it could increase the amount of tech fouls that we see. So if the goal was to lower those, I don't know. I see what the reasoning is because I guess it's like, okay, if we relax the rule, if we relax the rule, that maybe less teams will violate it. But I think that more teams are going to try and take advantage of the relaxed rule. So I think we've just shifted our goalposts outward a bit and then made them a little bit more ambiguous. So I don't know. I'm a little bit nervous about this one, but hopefully I'll be wrong. But regardless, even if this does help the refs and make things easier for them in terms of calling GO9, it still doesn't address the fact that some teams are disproportionately benefiting from this change than others. So, I mean, is it a game breaker? No, it's not, because I think teams can get the benefit by adding a little zip tie flip out thingy to their end of their intake or whatever. But I'm not a fan of it. At the same time, I'm not going to come down in the camps of people who are saying there should never be a rule change. Sometimes these rule changes help. And first is they're designing a game for 3,600 teams all around the globe, and they don't really get to beta test it. So these things happen. So it would be hypocritical of me to say I don't believe that there should ever be rules changes when I totally think the team update 11 change was super important. But I'm not a huge fan of the team update 13 one. So that's that.
I think that's for us. But chat is telling us that Team Update 15 is nothing major, just a correction to an incorrect Q&A answer. So in case you were worried about getting a whole new game to play in week 1 of competition, it's just a Q&A fix. But we do have a few minutes before Fun After Dark, so we can field some questions from chat that our live audience has submitted. There's quite a few here that we're going to take a look at, so if we don't get to yours before Fun After Dark, apologies. We will kind of move through them as fast as we can. Let's see. We have... Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so our first one, how about we just alternate back and forth, Libby?
Sure.
Have you ever felt that your effort to help improve first has led to a negative impact to your teams? I mean, that's like, if you want to look bigger picture, I definitely think that, Libby, how about you answer that one first and let me think on it.
I think what I would prefer to say is I am very well aware that being visible in the FIRST community has had a negative impact on my teams. Being who I am and who I am related to has had that. When I was in high school, someone came to our pit and said, you shouldn't be allowed to be on a team. It's cheating because you get the game early, which, by the way, as in high school, not true. 1 whole year, I was aware of things early. But in that event that everyone was telling me we shouldn't have a team, I shouldn't be allowed to compete in FIRST because it's unfair, we were last place. So I would really like to point out that in no way does 1923, when I was in high school, were we in any way, inappropriately working with FIRST. I'm aware that my visibility in the community has a negative impact on my team because people think that I'm doing something shady, which sucks. And my job as as lead mentor, is to protect my kids from that because that's very unfair. I don't think anything that I've done effort to help improve FIRST. All I've done is I've volunteered at events as volunteer coordinator. I don't think that kind of stuff has negative impact on teams, at least from my perspective. But I do think being visible and vocal can occasionally have negative impacts. I don't know if that's the same for you.
So there's a couple things I want to say. Number one, I feel that my efforts to improve FIRST have had a positive impact on 1114 in one way, in that, it helped us win a chairman's award. So that was kind of a big thing. So,
Fair.
Overall, I would never change anything, and I'm always going to be for trying to improve FIRST. Negatively, there's 2 things. One, I definitely don't spend, I'm not even that involved with 1114 anymore. But back in the day, I definitely spent so much time working on stuff for the FIRST community, and as a volunteer, I did spend less time on 1114 specific stuff, especially at events. I was so busy as a volunteer, I wasn't always there to give strategy advice and such the way that I was able to at championship. So that may have had a negative impact. On the other hand, some people might have said it had a positive impact. Who even knows? But I do think that just the increased visibility did put a target on 1114's back for some years. And I think that some people, really went out of their way to, in things like the GTR East incident of 2012 and stuff like that. But I don't really know if that's super connected. But also, honestly, when we started doing the outreach we did, Ontario teams weren't very good. And now Ontario teams are a lot better. And so it's definitely harder to win Ontario events because of a lot of our efforts from the kit bought on steroids and sharing design resources and whatever. But I don't regret that in the slightest because Ontario is just the coolest region right now. And I'm so proud of what we've done and so happy with everything there. A question for me, oh, sorry, Libby, you're going to do the next one.
Oh, okay.
Switchy.
Yeah.
Alternate.
Yeah, come on.
Rapid fire.
The question is thoughts on PNW basically being an outlier when it comes to out-of-district plays and little interaction with other districts in general. From my perspective, I would love one day to just go fly out and go to a district totally far away from us, but I agree you're a little bit of an island out there.
It's definitely an issue. I don't know if it bothers PNW teams, but I also don't see it changing anytime soon, because even when California goes districts in 15 years, the bulk of California teams are still not close to PNW. California is also a massive state. And then the other states, like the Idahos, the Montanas, the Wyomings don't have the density to really support that sort of thing. So I do think PNW, you are kind of on your own for a while. Sorry. Would these new teams from WoW affect how many people go to Marchamps? I can answer that one pretty quickly. So the way that the championship spots are, affect how many people go to Mar champs. So yes, I mean Mar would be bigger, and they probably are going to hold at like a 60-team championship. I know Ontario moved to an 80-team championship this year because we got a little bit bigger, so maybe that's in the future for Mar. Libby, can you speak to that?
I haven't looked into it, to be honest, but I believe that it would increase the size of the district. It would be, I think it was something like it was 15 or 20 teams that were added, which is, comparable to, needing to grow and having a bigger championship. I'm not sure Mar should go beyond a 60-team championship, just based on the depth of the field. But I also would hope that since it would be absorbing the Pittsburgh Regional, that we would also have additional award slots, additional culture change award spots and advancement spots from Mar champs forward, because that is population based. So I hope that would kind of nudge us up into the next, whatever it is, tier.
Right. You would definitely get more spots at the first championship. Yeah.
So one of our other questions, we've only got two more, is what are some ways HQ could make the game manual more comprehensive and easier to understand, especially for participants like rookie teams or teams who don't speak English as their first language? This year, it has obviously been a problem. I want a much simpler manual, but I'll let you rant.
I have a lot to say about this. So first is now up to 20% international, and we have to remember, so first released their thing about their 5 core founding principles, and one of them is diversity. So if we want to encourage diversity, both meaning in terms of international, but also people from different backgrounds academically, because we expect this manual to be read by students age 14. If you look at the scores for standardized testing of 14-year-olds across the U.S., it varies widely from school district to school district. And there's some school districts where students are struggling. Now, some people are saying, oh, we shouldn't cater to the lowest. Well, I mean, you're just a jerk. That's all I can say. Like, there's no harm in making this manual a little bit simpler. Now, is it easy to do? No, not at all. But I do think there are tactics. And I think if you bring in some consultants on how to simplify language and how to target an age group of, as I think this manual sometimes is aimed at 40-year-old engineers or 40-year-old professionals who have experience reading documents like this instead of aimed at 14-year-olds. I think there's a lot that could be done, and I think you could also, bring in a language expert to try and say, okay, how can we make this more, readily accessible to those, from an ESL background? I think there's a lot that could be done. I don't think it's a priority right now, but I do think it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the other things about that is so many manual translations fall on teams, where it's like, oh yeah, we'll just volunteer to do this translation, and that sucks. We first should definitely somewhere on the to-do list be putting that actual diversity into action.
Yeah, and I mean, the trade-off is that, I mean, the manual is so precise in many ways, you can lose that precision if you try and simplify the language. So I understand it's a trade-off here, but I mean, it would be cool. Our last question of the night from Letap Arth 610. Doesn't it make sense to not have rule changes that can reward a team for an entire component of the game, especially if they didn't design for it? Yes.
Yeah, I think we went over that a little bit.
Good question, Letap Arth 610.
610. Oh boy. Okay, what a way to end. We are going to let you guys move on to Fun After Dark. So thank you guys, everyone who is helping make the show possible. If you like what we do here on First Updates Now, all that we ask is that you click the follow button. It'll be up in that corner. And invite others to come watch the show and be part of an awesome community. You guys are the best. If you are able to support us for about the price of a cup of coffee, please consider giving bits or subscribing here on Twitch. You can even subscribe for free if you have Amazon Prime, and the funds go directly to supporting and creating all of the great content you see all week long on First Updates Now. Don't forget, you can add us on Snapchat now, too. That's also just First Updates Now. You can get some behind-the-scenes snaps from Fun's hosts all over the world. I think Christine and from 1225 and I are going to take over Palmetto for a little bit, so that could be fun. So that's going to be fun. We'll see you on Snapchat, I suppose.
And Candidly Speaking, we'll be back next month. I'm sure we will have lots to talk about after our first few weeks of regionals. I mean, maybe the Cheesy Poops will have unveiled their robot by then. It'll be a blast. We have a great lineup of shows every Monday and Tuesday with event coverage in between on the weekends. There's a lot going on. FRC Top 25 will be back. You're going to be voting for your top robots. I mean, I'm already putting 148 number one for this week. On behalf of Libby and our producer, Nick Olson, working behind the scenes, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. Thank you to all of the moderators in chat. You guys rock. If you're watching live, make sure to stick around for Fun After Dark, which starts in a few minutes, where you can call in, rant, and maybe even win some prizes. But who knows? So we'll see you next time on Candidly Speaking. Talk to you then, and Wakanda forever!
Bye, guys.